So we left off at the end of the notes last time talking about texture, having different sizes of particles and different percentages of each size of particle changes the texture of the soil. Density is another characteristic of soil. Density is a measure of mass per unit volume, which means soils that are considered dense have to have particles that can easily pack close to each other, because then they can pack more mass into the same volume of soil. So if something's sandy and it has a lot of big particles, those particles take up a lot of space and they don't fit together nicely, so there's a lot of empty space as well. So in a volume, you can only fit a certain amount of mass. But if you can take the same volume and pack more particles in, you'll have a denser soil sample. And mineral content is another example of a soil characteristic. Depending on the parent material that was weathered, different soils will have different minerals in them. So, going to have different soils depending on what your parent material is. Pretty simple stuff there. The next thing we're going to talk about is called a soil profile. Soil profiles are just vertical sections of the soil that show the layers in a soil. So if you've ever driven through where a road like cut through a mountain and you can see different colored layers of dirt and soil and rock, that was a soil profile. There are 3 horizons, which is the fancy name for layers, in a soil profile. The A horizon, which is the uppermost layer, that very top layer, okay? Sometimes it's thin, sometimes it's thicker, but it's always the thinnest of the layers. So just because we say thinnest, I don't want you to think that it's always like a super duper thin layer. It's just one of the smaller layers of soil. It's dark because this is the level closest to the surface where all the organic matter comes from. So this layer is heavy in organic matter, which makes it darker. You will often hear this layer called topsoil. This is where you're going to find most of your plant roots as well. Most plant roots don't reach too much lower. Okay, obviously you have large plants like trees, right? Their roots are obviously going to go through the topsoil, but lots of roots in this area. And it is always the most developed layer of soil. So what I mean by developed is it's the most changed from the parent material, the rock that started. So it's the most different from that parent material. Horizon B is often called subsoil. It has a lot of dissolved minerals and material, because what happens is rain falls on those top layers, dissolves those things, and they run down into this layer. Calcite and or clay can build up here, which sometimes means you're going to get a very clear and distinct layer, because if you have that clay that's very tight and compacted to itself, then not a lot of stuff is getting through that, so it's not going to mix into the layers below it as easily, so your layers will be much clearer. It's usually lighter in color. Again, that's because it has less humus. So you can see in the diagram there on your notes, you can see horizons A and B and see the differences between them. And our last horizon is the C horizon, okay? This is parent material that has been partially weathered. So it's more broken down in a lot of smaller pieces, but it's still very similar to the parent material that's under it. Its characteristics are going to be somewhere halfway between parent material and developing soil. So it's not going to have a lot of humus or any organic material mixed into it yet, but it's definitely more broken down and more soil-like than the actual parent material. And then directly underneath Horizon C is what you will sometimes hear referred to as the bedrock layer, and this is unweathered parent material. So it's just pure parent material that has not been broken down yet. That should be the end.